Pondercast is powered by our listeners. Please make a monthly donation to this independently produced podcast and help us grow it together. Go to patreon.com/pondercast. And in other news, our Pondercast t-shirts are happening. They are ready to move. Go to pondercast.ca/store to see our freaking great t-shirts. And also we have a pin up there for sale as well. Here's a piece of momentous news. We are going to do an East Coast tour, Joshua Van Tassel and myself. So stay tuned. When the dates are confirmed, you'll find all of that up on the website, pondercast.ca. Okay, let's go. Hi, I'm Laurie Brown. Let's Pondercast. Okay, so Survivor Man, aka Les Stroud. I met Les a long time ago. I was making a video for Corey Hart, and he was working with Champagne Pictures in Toronto, the company that was making it. And then a few years later, we found ourselves working together at Much Music. And then Les left to make a documentary series about taking his new wife into the woods to live off the land for a year. That happened, and then he went off on his own, and thus Survivor Man was born. For, I think it was 8 seasons between 2004 and 2013, Les turned a ton of people onto survival skills. And maybe more importantly, into a desire to be out in the wilderness. Les shot the series himself because he was alone out there for 7 to 10 days with little or no food, a multi-tool, and a harmonica. It was courageous and riveting television. Doing this kind of adventuring in a group is a life-changing experience. Doing it by yourself, that's a whole other level. So I wanted to talk to Survivor Man about sound and silence and experiencing the wilderness alone. Turns out when he got lonely, he would pull out his harmonica to send some sound out into the wild. He is a remarkable blues harp player, and his latest album is called Bittern Lake, named for the place he recorded it in Muskoka, Ontario. Talking to a musician about sound and silence and nature, I guessed Les would have some interesting things to say. We started talking about the album Bittern Lake.
The beautiful thing about being up there that I found is as much as I've been able to and been blessed to be able to travel around the world, it's really world class up there in Muskoka. You know, and as a topic matter being sounds. You actually, well, for example, the Bittern Lake, where I'm recording, the reason why I have my place there is because it's a non-motorized lake. Just the sound of canoes and kayaks. Although the seagulls are really loud right now, but for anyone who escapes the city and has a cottage country experience, they know what it's like to fall asleep and not hear traffic, and that's pretty special.
What is the message on this album, Bittern Lake?
I've been able to, in the last while of my own artistry and my own writing, focus everything on celebrating nature. On celebrating nature, protecting the earth. Everything I ever did in my filmmaking had as its core connecting to nature. So sure, I'm making a shelter, a Survivor Man, or a fire bow, but the reality is I'm really just saying, aren't these really cool skills that can get you outside? And musically speaking, I like to joke, like, I'm over 50, you don't want to hear my love songs. It's not pretty. So I knew that, you know, I'll focus on what I really know and what I really love. Which was celebrating nature. Every single film I ever made out there, I began in the morning, sitting by a rock, a river, a lake, a mountain, you name it. And I always said the same thing. Whatever I'm about to film today, let it be something that inspires people and brings about a positive influence in their lives. And that was my mantra. And then I would kind of get up and give my head a shake and think, oh, don't be such a dolt, you're just making a shelter. But sure enough, as years went on, I saw the inspiration take hold in a lot of people's lives because of that television series. So I endeavored to do the same thing with my music. Have a message that is all about connecting to the earth.
Mm. The bit of music that you took with you on those trips was your harmonica, and you are a kick-ass harmonica player, Les.
Well, thank you. That's fun.
Tell me when and how and why you would play harmonica when you would find yourself very far away and very alone.
The harp, as you know, we lovingly call it the blues harp. It was pragmatic. It was all pragmatism. If I was in nature with the harmonica, just in the same way that I don't actually write songs when I'm out there, what I do when I go to nature is I let nature infuse within me. I let it all percolate over time, and then I'll sit at my coffee table with a glass of wine and start to write about it. The harmonica was the same. However, on the pragmatic side of things, it is superb at scaring bears away. So there were many times, traveling alone in really thick bush where I could not see up ahead. Okay, I'll just start blowing on the harmonica. And that would just send out that warning signal, which was a lot nicer to listen to than a whistle. That said, since we're discussing sounds, I will never forget on a canoe trip, I had my harp and I was playing to the lake and I was getting the echo. And you can think of the opening to that Supertramp song with the long wailing harmonica.
Oh yeah.
What is it?
Is it
School.
Crime?
I Can See You in the Morning. Yeah, remember that song? So think of that. And I started doing that. And within about 5 minutes, I had 25 common loons come into the bay and sing with me. And they were calling back and calling back. So I've used the harp, like I say, primarily in a pragmatic sense to scare away, animals I don't want to run into. But at the same time, I've called in loons successfully a few times, and one time had a wolf call back. And that just gave me chills. So, again, just blowing little harmonica, kind of long moaning riff, and then stopping and listening to it echo across the lake just for fun, and then you hear, off in the background, and then the chills just go up on the back of your neck. It was beautiful.
As a survival skill, what role does sound play? Like, how important is listening to know what's happening around you?
The question you ask really lends itself to go into a deeper zone, and that is the senses, all of the senses that you have when you're out there. What I believe happens is when you utilize your sense of hearing and smell and sight and feel what? Well, you feel the branches or the wind blowing against your skin. Out in the wilderness, they all conspire to awaken your sixth sense, which is our instinct and our intuition. And it's strengthened. Like, we could be here speaking right now and you could have some aromatherapy going. That's great. And it's probably got maybe 12 ingredients. But the minute, I mean, we're close to a place in Toronto called High Park. If we go out into High Park, the combination of chemicals that are hitting you, even in the city in High Park, must be in the billions. We can't imitate that medically. But our senses take it all in. The sense of sound, you really run the spectrum of how people. I think people want to think about. But when you hear scary things and you hear creepy things at night, you do. And I love to let people know that if you hear something that sounds like a mouse, it's probably the size of a beetle. If it sounds like it's a bear, it's probably a raccoon or a squirrel. If it sounds like a freight train, okay, then it's likely a bear or a mouse. But so sounds are very tricky at night in the wilderness because of our fears, the fears that we grow with or we get from films or from our parents. When in reality, you begin to learn as a survival guy, when you're doing that kind of thing or wilderness adventure, you begin to utilize the sounds for knowing where a set of rapids is, where an outlet from a lake might be, recognizing the animals and knowing this is a safe sound, that's a safe sound. I don't like the sound of that. You'd never stop listening. Here it's a cacophony. It's a different cacophony in the wilderness. It's an enjoyable cacophony. Not for everybody. I see people with fear, but not for me. For me, it's a very enjoyable cacophony when you have all of the sounds of the wilderness awakening that instinctual sense, I think.
When you talk about when all of your senses are working together and that informs a sixth sense, that instinct, can you tell me what that feels like when you've got everything working and you can feel that sixth sense come into play?
Well, it feels perfect. You feel perfect in the moment. It feels like everything's right in the world at that moment. If we think about it in terms of regular modern life, city life, non-wilderness life, I was just saying this to someone the other day. Here's how I learned to utilize instinct. I will take in all of these feelings, everything that's going on, and then I will think of, if there's, maybe say there's 3 outcomes to what I'm about to do something. I could do 3 different things for 3 different outcomes. Which one's correct? We need our instinct, our intuition to tell us. Well, how do you hear your intuition? What I do is I really project well myself into each one of those outcomes. So outcome number 1, that just doesn't feel right. Outcome number 2, it's sort of benign. Outcome number 3, that actually feels, and that's my intuition saying, yes, Les, are you listening to me? It's outcome number 3. You can go for the other 2. You can force the issue if you like, and you might even be successful. But outcome number 3 is the one where your whole body, all of your instincts just go, oh, that's where I'm supposed to be. And sure, you're guessing, but it's guessing, utilizing, and listening to the sound of your own instincts, your own intuition. I want when you asked me to come to share with you things about silence and sound, I wanted to definitely go there for a couple of experiences that were very profound. I'd spent a year living in the bush with my then wife, and I discovered something in the wilderness. There's only 2 times in the year where the silence is otherworldly. Nothing is making a sound. It almost seems impossible, doesn't it? Certainly impossible in the city. Is that impossible in nature? It's not. And here are the 2 times. First one will be a June day, very muggy, very hot, and all of a sudden it could be 2 p.m. and everything goes still. And I've stood there and thought, I can't even hear a cicada. I don't hear an ant crawling. I don't hear anything at all. And I've experienced that in nature. a couple of times where it's so still, there's zero making a sound. Number two, the polar opposite of that. January, minus 45 degrees Celsius, and I'm standing on a frozen lake. There's no wind, no airplanes in the distance, and all of a sudden I realize there's no sound. There's nothing. And here's something that's going to be hard for you to swallow, but I guess just trust me on it, because this is what I experienced. I remember in both of those occasions, I felt like I could hear the sound of the earth turning. Fanciful, perhaps. Nonsense, possibly. But I'm in my core, I just stood there and thought, I can hear the earth moving. It's just.
R. Murray Schafer would completely agree with you. He says that there's a hum
Yes,
to the
a hum.
universe
Yes.
that is possible. The music of the spheres is what you're talking about there. I'm glad you brought it up, because that was my hardest question for you. I don't even really know how to word it, but it's an experience I've had that's quite similar. I used to believe that silence was nothing, that silence was the absence of sound. And now, in the few experiences that I've experienced pure silence, as pure as I can get it, silence feels like everything to me instead of nothing.
Yeah, the irony.
Yeah.
I would agree. When I had those times, so I'm not in a sound chamber, I'm actually in the earth, I'm there in the wilderness, and yet I've got the experience of a sound chamber. Nothing, just no sound. And that's what, I didn't feel small and insignificant. I felt part of everything. Because I felt like I could hear the sound of the earth turning, I felt bigger. I felt part of it. Because now I can actually hear it. These experiences that I'm giving you happened to me in Wabakimi Park area in Northern Ontario, both the cold one and the hot one. And yes, you feel part of it. Now, on another experiential level of that, I remember laying there and it being very, very quiet, and I could hear this other kind of sound. It was a buzzing sound. For a while I thought, I wasn't sure, maybe it was a tinnitus, I kind of was able to kind of rule that out. And do you know what I could hear?
What?
From maybe 75 miles away, I could hear the diesel hum of clear cutting. Yeah, that's what we figured it out. That's what I could hear. Laying on my little cot in a little log cabin and hearing this buzzing, it traveled through the ground. And sure enough, over time checking it out, getting closer, I could hear the hum of clear cutting like 75 miles away. It doesn't seem, what a silly claim, last so you're superhuman. No, this is just the connectivity of the earth, what you hear. I was glad when I got to hear the silence again, and just listen to the earth hum.
Do you listen to nature and hear it perhaps with the same kind of brain that you listen to music with?
That's a very interesting question. I want to answer in the affirmative. I want to say yes, because I'm just trying to feel my emotions on those two moments. And the inspiration I feel in nature when I listen to, the birds and bees and everything else, and the water and the rapids. And with music, I was talking to someone yesterday about lyrics and music. I like poetry, I like reading, but boy, when it's served up on a bed of chord changes and music, it just, I'm in, whether it's Leonard Cohen, or Bruce Cockburn or whomever, or Joni Mitchell, very poetic Bob Dylan, as long as it's on a couple of chord changes, I'm so much more. And I think it's the same feeling as I would have in nature, yeah. Which is why I don't miss music when I'm in nature. I really don't. I kind of almost feel guilty about it sometimes, but there were so many times in nature where I just didn't care, what was going on over there, I just didn't care because nature was always enough.
Your most beautiful sound experiences in the wild, other than the silence.
Yeah, where do we begin? Wow. I once stood on the shore of an island, which I'm going to in 4 days, actually. I haven't been there in years. In 4 days, I'm going to paddle out to this island in Temagami, Ontario. And it was, we started off by talking about a place like Muskoka. Well, the image of the glassy lake, the water's not moving. It's a warm summer night, starry. Maybe the mosquitoes have finished their time, You're there. And I stood on this island, and I'm pretty good at wolf calls. So my friend and his wife were out in the canoe, and they were just being romantic, floating under the stars. And, oh, how wonderful. So I do this wolf call, and I do this thing. And I just paused. And they knew I did that, and they thought, haha, And about 30 to 40 wolves from about a quarter mile behind me responded. And they lit up the lake with echoes. And when my friend Ian and his wife Jo realized it's not less anymore, and they said it was the most magical thing they'd ever experienced, Or that long, the loons are wonderful, but boy, the long, low moan of a loon in the middle of the night, When you hear that and nothing else, to me, my whole body just relaxes. Laying on my back on a point, windy point, and there's a very distinctive sound of wind when it blows through white pine.
Yes.
And it's only the white pine. Red pine's pretty nice too, but it's a kind of a, but when it goes through white pine, yeah, that's a sound that you can't equal that anywhere else. When I was in grade 5, the first creation I ever did of writing, and I've been writing songs since I was 14. But in grade 5, I wrote a poem. The name of the poem was I Hate Noise. I still have it on a piece of paper, foolscap, in a photo album somewhere. I hate noise, the crashing, booming sounds of the city, or the terrifying sounds of a motorcycle gang, but I love the sounds of a lapping river, or something like that. It was a poem from a kid in grade 5. So I guess it's no mistake that I ended up, doing the things I do. That was always part of it. I never knew why I was very passionate about nature. I still to this day don't know why. Jacques Cousteau spoke to me, or Tarzan. I don't know why. I just...
Sounds like sound was part of it. Noise was part of it.
Sound is always part. So when I would escape the city and dysfunctional family life and all of that to be up in Muskoka. Okay, here's another sound story. This is cliche now, but I used to play survival things when I was a kid, 10 years old, on the rocks in behind the cottage off Van Coonet Road, Muskoka Road 118 up near Bracebridge, Ontario. And I would lie there. And when I was young, I could lie there and I could go 20 minutes without the sound of a car. And I remember even as a kid feeling profound about that and going, and when a car would start coming, the body would cinch up a bit. Oh, come on, hurry up and get past. Okay, now I know I got another 20 minutes without a sound. Of course, I'm coming from Toronto, right? So it was important to me. Silence. Maybe just in this conversation, I'm realizing how important silence has always been to me, which is ironic because I'm a talkative, driven guy. But it started way back then, lying on my back, looking up, watching the clouds go by, and not being able to hear traffic. But you can't do that. If I were to go to that same place, that same rock right now, in fact, over time, as my teenage years came on, I remember thinking, now it's every 10 minutes. Now it's every 5 minutes. Now really, there's not much of a break. You have to go somewhere else. So.
What do you think we, as humans, stand to lose as we start to lose silence in our world?
Perspective, for one. I think just like travel gives you perspective, silence, I think, gives you a perspective on your current reality. You and I are talking a lot right now, and we're filling the gaps, we're filling the holes. I just watched the documentary, Won't You Be My Neighbor, about Mr. Rogers. And if you'll indulge me for a second, there's a whole thing about how he enjoyed silence. And it goes like that.
Mm-hmm.
He took a egg timer and said, would you like to know how long a minute is? Well, let's find out. He presses the egg timer and they say nothing for a minute of air time. You know what? I think in many ways for me silence is no different than my yoga in the morning. My eating properly on occasion. My workout training on occasion. And silence, being and sitting with silence. I'm not a good meditator. But here's what, you've been asking me about silence in nature. Here's what I discovered works for me in a meditative perspective. And there's so many ways to meditate. And many people are beautiful at it and teach well. I've tried different things. I've never really caught on except one thing. Shinrin Yoku, which is 10 minutes which is forest bathing. Just sitting in a forest. So sitting in silence in the forest, I realized I don't have to do any kind of formal meditation. It's happening. Kind of whether I want it to or not. I have a program I run in New York at the Omega Institute, and I take people out, and I don't teach them how to build shelters. I teach them how to meditate in nature. And the first thing I do is give them a mat and have them lie down on the ground by themselves and just look up and just listen. You lay there and your ears open up, and now you're hearing this bird. The bird could be a mile away, but you can hear it because you're allowing the silence of nature to just swirl, I guess.
And all of a sudden you find that you are really in a place.
And feel better. But you must allow yourself to receive the silence. A lot of people get nervous. I'm fond of saying you can get nature even in the city. And you can't. There are trees. Outside the windows where I'm looking right now, there are trees. That's nature, and there's energy in the tree. But what's not there is silence. For that, I guess we have to seek it out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that was Survivor Man, Les Stroud, on Pondercast. He has set me a new challenge. I want to get to a place so quiet that I too can hear the earth hum. If you like what you're hearing, please consider making a monthly donation to us through Patreon. Go to patreon.com/pondercast. Our little independent podcast can use all the help it can get. And t-shirts are available. Go to pondercast.ca. I'm Lori Brown. Have a great night and have a great day.